I'm 25. My brother Tyler is 22. 3 months ago, we lost both of our parents in a car accident. It still doesn't feel real. One minute they were on their way to a weekend trip, and the next, I was getting a call from the police saying there had been a collision, and neither of them survived. Our family was never particularly emotional or close-knit, but we were functional, stable. We never went without. My mom was a high school teacher. My dad worked in corporate logistics. We had a nice house, a decent life. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. But after their deaths, everything flipped upside down. Here's where it starts getting weird. Despite being the older sibling, I didn't inherit anything. My parents had a will. It was updated just 6 months before their accident. According to the documents, everything, the house, the savings accounts, the cars, their entire estate, was left to Tyler. All of it. The only explanation the lawyer gave me was that they wanted to ensure the one who needed it most was taken care of. I was given a small lump sum, $10,000, compared to the six-figure estate my brother now controlled. I didn't understand it. I still don't. Tyler didn't even seem surprised when we went over the will together. In fact, he barely flinched. Just nodded like he was expecting it. That alone gave me chills. We've never been close. 3 years apart. Completely different personality. I moved out when I was 19 and never looked back. He stayed home, worked part-time, and mostly played video games. Always kind of a loner. Not a bad guy, just distant. Weird, sometimes. At the funeral, he barely said anything. No tears, no speech, no emotion. People chalked it up to shock, but I don't think it was that. I watched him closely while everyone else was grieving, and he just sat there, calm, almost content. And that's when the first thought slipped into my mind, the one I've been trying to push away ever since. What if he knows more than he's letting on? What if this wasn't just an accident? After the funeral, I stayed in our childhood home for a few days. Tyler had offered, surprisingly, said I shouldn't be alone right now. That was the first time he had ever said something like that to me, and it felt off. Not kind, not sweet. Off, like he was mimicking what someone should say in a situation like that. The house looked exactly like it always had. Same pictures on the wall, same furniture, same burnt-smelling microwave from 2014, but it didn't feel the same. Maybe that's grief, or maybe it's because everything felt like it now belonged to someone else. The day after the funeral, I noticed something strange. I went to grab something from the hall closet, some old photo albums my mom used to keep in a box labeled Summer Memory, but the box was gone. Not just that one. All the family photo boxes were missing. Every single. I asked Tyler about, and he just shrugged, said he had packed them away in the attic for safekeeping. I asked why he didn't just leave them where they were, and he said something like, "It's better not to keep too much of the past lying around," which, again, would sound normal if it came from someone else. But from him, it felt rehearsed, like he was trying to steer me away from asking more questions, and I was full of questions. Why did they change the will 6 months ago? Why did Tyler get Why didn't they even mention me? Just that little payout and nothing more. Not even a note, or a letter, or any final message from. The lawyer said the decision came family discussion, except I wasn't part of it. I hadn't even heard from my parents that they'd updated anything, and that's not normal. My mom called me for everything, when she switched cable providers, when she bought a new blender. But somehow she changed her entire will and never told me. I started snooping, just a little. Tyler had kept their laptops. Said he needed to clean them out. But when I walked into the office, I noticed both machines were gone. Not shut down. Gone. Not a trace of them in the house. I asked where they went, and Tyler said he'd recycled them already. Barely a week after the funeral. I stared at him. He smiled and said, "They were old anyway." That night, I didn't sleep. Something was crawling under my skin. A quiet dread I couldn't shake. The next morning, I found one of Mom's old journals in the drawer of the kitchen hutch. One of those gratitude journals she used to write in every day. The date of the last end, exactly 6 months before the crash, was short. Tyler's acting strangely. Keeps asking about the will. I told him not to worry about it. He didn't like that. Not sure what's going on with him, but he's been so quiet and cold lately. It's unsettling. I sat there, staring at that sentence, reading it over and over until the words stopped making sense. What had he said to them? What did he do? I knew I had to get out of that house, but something told me not before I figured out what Tyler was hiding. That journal entry kept echoing, and Tyler's acting strange lately. Keeps asking about the will. It had a tone. My mom didn't usually write things like that unless she was genuinely worried. I didn't tell Tyler. I slipped it into my bag and pretended nothing had changed. That night, I pretended to go to sleep. I turned off the light in the guest room and crawled under the covers fully dressed. I lay still, phone on silent, heart pounding. I wanted to see what Tyler did when I was asleep. Around 2 a.m., footsteps. Not down the hallway, not the creaky kind floorboard. These were outside, moving slowly past my. At first, I thought I was imagining. Then I saw a shadow move across the curtain. It wasn't Tyler. Whoever it was didn't knock. Didn't try to come in. Just stood there for a few seconds. Then walked away. I waited until everything was quiet again, then slipped out of bed and moved to the window. There was a car idling down the street, a dark sedan. Couldn't make out the plates, but it definitely wasn't one of the neighbors. It stayed there for a while, maybe 10 minutes. Then it drove off without headlights. The next morning, I casually mentioned the streetlight was out and asked if Tyler had seen anyone strange around. He didn't even blink, said no one comes down this road except locals. Then he added, "But you know how paranoid you can be." That stung. He was trying to undermine me, make me doubt myself. He used to say that kind of thing a lot when we were younger, especially when he'd done something wrong. Always made me feel like I was the crazy one for questioning. So that night, I took matters into my own hands. While Tyler was out at the store, I broke into his room. How that sounds. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was in there, something he didn't want me to see. I wasn't prepared for what I found. Tucked inside his closet, behind some old sweaters, was a metal lockbox, the kind our dad used to use for important documents. It wasn't locked. Inside were 3 things: an envelope with a lawyer's logo on it, marked with the date 7 months ago, a burner phone, turned off but still warm, it had just been used, a USB drive, unlabeled. I didn't have time to go through everything, just snapped some photos of the documents and shoved the USB into my pocket. I was back in the guest room before Tyler got home. He didn't suspect a thing. But later that night, when I opened the files on the USB, that's when everything changed. There were only 3 folders on the USB. All of them had generic names: Docs, Photos, and MISC. No dates, no labels, nothing. But the moment I opened the first folder, my stomach. Inside Docs were PDFs, scanned copies of my parents' will, not the updated one, the original version from 3 years ago. In that version, everything was split evenly between Tyler and me. 50-50. I stared at it for a long time, trying to process what that meant. Why would Tyler still have a copy of the old will? And more importantly, why did my parents change it only 6 months before they died? I opened the next folder. Photos. At first glance, it was random screenshots, blurry images of emails. Some were clearly taken on a phone camera, but one file caught my eye. It was a photo of a letter, crumpled and slightly torn, dated exactly 6 months and 3 days before the accident. It was addressed to my dad, from my mom. I don't feel comfortable making Tyler the sole beneficiary. I don't care what the therapist says. He's still unpredictable. I know he's been through a lot, but this doesn't feel right. I want to talk about it more before we finalize anything. There was no signature, just that short note. It looked like she'd never sent it. Or maybe she did, and he just never responded. I moved to the last folder, MISC, and that's where I found the video. No title, just a timestamp from 2 weeks before the accident. It was security camera footage. Low quality, grainy, and clearly from our parents' garage. The angle showed the back door, the tool bench, and part of the car. Tyler walked in, alone. He was wearing gloves. He went straight to the car, opened the hood, and then he did something to the brake lines. I couldn't tell exactly what, just that he was down there for a long time, working carefully. I didn't want to believe what I was seeing. My brother, messing with our parents' car. 2 weeks before they died in that car. I paused the video, rewatched it. He looked so calm, so focused, like he'd rehearsed it. I felt cold all over. My hands were shaking. Every piece of the puzzle was clicking together, and it made me sick. He did it. I don't know how or why exactly, but I'm sure of it now. Tyler killed them. And the worst part? I was still living in his house. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound made me jump. A door creak, pipes groaning, footsteps. I was sure Tyler would come barging in at any moment, demanding to know what I'd found. That maybe he'd seen the USB was missing, that he'd put it there as a trap, and I'd walked right into it. But nothing happened. In the morning, he was casual, made coffee, asked if I wanted eggs. He even joked about how I looked like I hadn't slept, and the way he looked at me when he said it. Too sharp, too knowing. I played it cool, said I had a migraine, planned to rest in bed most of the day. He didn't question it. The second he left for the gym, I packed a bag. Not all my stuff, just the essentials: laptop, journal, USB, Mom's letter. I told myself I was going to my friend Megan's for the weekend. That was my excuse. But really, I just needed to get out. Except as I was zipping up my bag, I heard a buzz. Tyler's iPad was sitting on the kitchen counter, notifications popping up one after another. I knew it was risky, but I couldn't help myself. One message caught my eye. It was from a name I didn't recognize, just the letter D. The preview read, "She's getting too close. You need to handle it." My blood ran cold. I opened the full message. There weren't many messages, and most of them were cryptic. Just short bursts, no names, but it was obvious they were talking about, "She's snooping again. Don't let her find the copies. What if she goes to the cops? Then make sure she doesn't." I took screenshots of everything, sent them to myself, then deleted the email I used just in case Tyler checked. I was shaking so hard I almost dropped the iPad. This wasn't just paranoia. He knew, or at least suspected, that I was onto something, and now someone else knew too. Someone named D. Someone telling him to handle it. I ran out of that house like it was on fire. I didn't go to Megan's. I didn't go to any friend's house. I got in my car and drove straight to a motel 2 towns over, paid in cash, didn't tell anyone where I was going. I needed time to think, to plan, because if Tyler really did kill our parents, and now he thought I knew, then I might be next. The motel I checked into was one of those places that looks worse in daylight. Yellow walls, stained carpet, and a broken vending machine humming in the hallway. But it was anonymous, and that's what I needed. I spent the next 24 hours combing through everything, the screenshots, the video, the emails, my mom's journal entry. I laid it all out, trying to build a timeline, trying to understand how far back this went, and if anyone else was involved. That message from Dee haunted me. She's getting too close. You need to handle it. Who says something like that unless they're serious? Who was Dee? I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I had to know more about Tyler's life, who he talked to, who he trusted. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened his social media. Tyler rarely posted. He wasn't one of those guys who shared every meal or gym selfie. He kept a small, quiet circle. I scrolled through his followers, looking for any names that could match Dee, and that's when I found her. Danica, a girl he'd met through a community college class 2 years ago. Her profile was mostly private, but her bio said she worked at a mechanics shop in our town. Mechanic. Brake lines. I nearly dropped my phone. It couldn't be a coincidence. I went to her profile picture and stared at her face, trying to remember if I'd ever met her. I hadn't, but she'd liked several of Tyler's posts, including one from the week after parents died, with the caption, "New chapter begins. One step at a time." She commented, "Proud of you." I clicked on her name and scrolled. She had posted a photo of herself standing in front of a car, smiling, grease on her hands, and in the corner of the image, Tyler's jacket was draped over a chair in the background. I knew that jacket. Dad gave it to him last Christmas. Tyler had been to her shop. More than once, clearly, and she had the skills, the tools, the access. What if he didn't do it alone? What if she helped? I didn't know who to trust. I didn't want to go to the police yet, not without a solid case, and definitely not when Tyler had every legal right to the house. The money, everything. He would make me look crazy, grieving, paranoid, but I needed help. So I reached out to the only person I knew would believe me, my Uncle James, my dad's older brother. He was a former cop, retired, smart, and always had a gut for shady behavior. We hadn't spoken much since the funeral. He'd kept his distance, said he didn't want to overstep. I texted him just one sentence. "I think Tyler killed them. I need you to call me." He responded 2 minutes later. "I've been waiting for this." I met Uncle James at a diner halfway between my motel and his place. He was already seated at a corner booth, sipping black coffee like he hadn't aged a day since retirement, but his eyes looked tired, like he'd been expecting this moment for weeks. I barely sat down before he said, "I knew something was off the second I saw Tyler at the funeral." He told me he'd kept quiet because he didn't want to cloud my judgment with suspicions. Said he figured I'd come to him if and when I saw it for myself, and I had. I showed him everything. The altered will, the footage from the garage, the journal entry from Mom, the burner phone, the screenshots of the messages from Dee, the photo of the girl from the mechanic shop. James didn't speak for a long time. He just kept flipping through my phone slowly, nodding, piecing things together. Then he finally said it. This wasn't just premeditated. It was clean, professional. I've seen hired jobs with sloppier execution. My stomach turned. Hired. That word changed everything. "You think he paid someone?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. He nodded. Then he leaned in and said something I'll never forget. "Your parents didn't die on the highway like the report said. They were found in their driveway. The car crashed into the garage wall." I blinked. "No, that's not right. The police said—" "I know what the police said, but I have a friend who works dispatch. I asked him to pull the initial 911 call that came in that morning. It wasn't from a passerby on the road. It was from a neighbor. Said the crash woke her up. That's how I knew something wasn't right. Your dad didn't fall asleep at the wheel. The brakes failed the second he started backing out of the garage. I felt like the floor dropped out from under me. So the whole story, the highway crash, the tragic accident, all of it, was fake." My uncle looked me dead in the eye and said, "Tyler didn't just want their money. He wanted it fast. And he didn't want to share it." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small, a flash drive. "What's this?" I asked. "It's a recording. Security footage from the neighbor's doorbell cam. She gave it to me after I asked her some questions. It shows your parents' car starting to roll and then jerking violently before smashing into the wall." I swallowed hard. "Does it show Tyler?" He shook his head. "No, but it shows what time it happened, and that time lines up exactly with the delivery receipt Tyler signed for across town. 40 minutes away." I was confused. "So that clears him?" "No, it means he planned it to happen when he was out, to give himself an alibi." Suddenly, everything felt so much bigger. He didn't just kill them. He planned it, covered it, created a timeline, fabricated a will, got someone to help, and now he's the problem. I looked at him. "What do we do?" He didn't hesitate. We go to the police. But first, we make sure we're not being watched. Uncle James and I left the diner separately. He insisted, said it was better if we weren't seen together again for a while. He was going to review the footage and prep the files to hand over to someone he trusted at the department, someone who wouldn't tip Tyler off too soon. I went back to the motel and packed my things. There was no way I was sleeping in the same place again now that I knew Tyler might be watching me. I didn't even go back to the same motel office to check out. I just left the key on the table and walked out the back door. I didn't go far. Booked a different room at a new place 20 miles away under a fake name, used cash. I was paranoid now, double-checking every car behind me, every person at a gas station. I felt like someone was breathing down my neck, because the truth was, someone might have been. The moment I settled into the new room, I turned off my phone. Uncle James had warned me, assume anything digital is compromised. If Tyler's smart enough to fake a will and stage a crash, he's smart enough to track you. I was barely an hour when 3 knocks on the door. No one knew I was there. No one. I froze. The knocks came again, then silence. I crept to the peephole, heart slamming in my chest. A woman stood outside, probably late 20s, blonde, black hoodie. No luggage, no name tag, no reason to be knocking on a random motel. She wasn't a guest. She definitely wasn't motel staff. She stood there without saying a. She walked away, but the way she glanced sideways into the peephole right before, she knew I was there. I waited 10 minutes. Then I looked out the window. She was gone, but a dark blue car was parked across the lot. Engine red, license plate. It started with a D. My blood went cold. I grabbed my bag, slipped out the back, and got in my car. Drove with no music, no lights, just instinct. I called Uncle James from a burner I picked up at a drugstore. When he answered, I didn't even say hi. She found me, I said. Danica. I think she was here. There was a long pause. Then he said, we don't have time to wait anymore. We're going to the police. But we're not going through the front desk. Uncle James arranged everything. We met just outside city limits, in the parking lot of an old bait shop that closed years ago. It was the kind of place no one drove by unless they were lost. He handed me a hoodie, sunglasses, and a baseball cap, like I was entering witness protection. Honestly, it felt like I was. From there, we drove an hour to another county, because James didn't trust the local PD. Said too many small-town favors could be pulled by someone like Tyler, especially if Danica had connections through her shop. We ended up in a government building I'd never been to, where James walked me through the side entrance and into a tiny conference room. That's where I met Detective Fallon. She didn't look impressed by my story at first. Polite but guarded. You could tell she'd heard it all. Paranoid siblings, bitter inheritance fights, wild theories. But James had already sent her the files ahead of time, and once she opened the folder, her entire posture changed. She asked me to walk her through every detail. I told her everything, from the will to the journal entry, the video footage, the message from Dee, the girl at the door, the brake lines. I told her what my uncle told me. It wasn't a highway crash. It happened in the garage, and Tyler had planned the whole thing. When I was done, she sat in silence for a long time. Then she said, you're right to be afraid. This isn't a case of suspicion anymore. This is premeditated, and possibly murder for hire. She asked me to stay off the grid for a few more days while they verified the documents and traced the burner phone. She said they'd already pulled the security cam footage from the neighbor's house, and they had something even more valuable, the original 911 call. I didn't get to hear it, yet, but Fallon said it included something the public report never mentioned. A woman's voice screaming in the background when the crash happened, one that didn't match my mom's or anyone in the house. Danica? Maybe, but the real gut punch came next. Fallon told us that the updated will, the one that left everything to Tyler, was never officially notarized. It had signatures, it had dates, but it was missing one crucial thing, the notary seal. That meant the will was never legally binding. The estate should have been split 50-50, which meant Tyler had been lying to me, and the lawyer. Fallon told us not to make contact with him, not to let him know we were working with police, that a formal investigation was starting immediately, and then she said something I didn't expect. We're opening this as a homicide case. That word hit me like a freight train. Up until now, I'd been using softer words in my accident, sabotage, maybe even manslaughter. Homicide, that was real. I left the station with one final instruction from Fallon. If he contacts you again, let us know, and whatever you do, don't go back to that. I plan to follow. But later that night, I got a message from an unknown. One sentence. You shouldn't have gone through my stuff. My hands were shaking when I read that message. You shouldn't have gone through my stuff. No name, no number, just those 8 words. I stared at the screen for so long, I didn't even realize I'd stopped breathing. It had to be Tyler. No one else would know what I did. No one else could say something like that and make it feel like a threat without ever using the word. I called Uncle James immediately. He didn't answer. Called again, straight to voicemail. For a second, my stomach turned cold. What if Tyler had gone after him? But then my phone buzzed. A message. I'm fine. At the station. They brought me in early. Get ready. It's happening tonight. And just like that, everything started moving fast. That night, around 8 p.m., Detective Fallon called me herself. They had enough. The forged will, the brake footage, the messages from D, the 911 call, the unnotarized paperwork, and now the threat to me. It all added up. They had already issued a warrant for Tyler's arrest, but they didn't need it, because he came to them. Walked into the station around 7:30 p.m. with Danica at his side. Said he wanted to clear the air. Claimed the will was legit, that the accident was just that, an accident. They were calm, polite, civil, until Fallon dropped the truth on. Told him the updated will wasn't valid, that they had footage of him tampering the brake system, that they had messages between him and Danica discussing how to handle me, that the 911 call had captured a woman's voice at the scene, Danica's voice. That's when it unraveled. Tyler broke first, said it had all been a joke that went too far, that he just wanted to scare our parents, not hurt them, that he didn't know the brakes would fail that badly, that he thought they'd be injured, not killed, that Danica promised she knew how to disable the brakes, just enough. Danica, of course, lawyered up immediately. She hasn't spoken a word since. But it didn't matter. They had enough to hold them both. Attempted insurance fraud, evidence tampering, premeditated conspiracy, and now, murder charges. Because there was one more thing Detective Fallon hadn't told me until it was official. The coroner's report was reopened. Turns out, my dad didn't die from the crash. Not immediately. There were signs he had tried to crawl out of the car after it smashed into the garage wall. His hands were bloodied, glass embedded in his arms. But something stopped him. A blunt force injury to the side of his skull. One that came after the crash. Someone finished the job. And now we know who.